In this knife talk video, we're looking at the Great Eastern Cutlery Tidioute number 78 American Jack in smooth white bone. And this video was requested by Ahud Shalev. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but I hope this is what you were looking for. And if you enjoy this video, I'm doing it because it was requested. So if you have any requests for, knife talk, longer videos on certain knives that I've done 1 minute overviews on, that's something that definitely, let me know, and hopefully I'll be able to accommodate it. But let's take a look at this knife here. So as the name suggests, this is a jackknife, and that means that the knife comes out of one end of the handle. So a multi-blade knife, if there were more than one blade, the blades would come out of both sides. But a jackknife, if there's more than one blade, all of the blades come out of one side of the handle. And they did make a two-blade version of this, and I actually had the two-blade version of the 78 American Jack in smooth white bone, the same as this one. Excuse me. But I didn't like the Penn secondary, not because that blade itself wasn't a good blade or anything, but it was a pretty long secondary, and it actually ended up covering part of the nail nick, or I think it was a long pull actually. I can't remember if there's a nail nick or a long pull on the main blade on the two-blade version, but whichever it was, the secondary blade, the Penn blade, kind of covered it and made it hard for me to open the main blade. So I decided to get a single blade version, and I actually got this knife in December of 2017 and then carried it every day for the month of January in 2018. So this knife has been used quite a bit, and I grew to like it. It's a nice knife. It's a spear point blade, as you can see, and a very kind of classic looking jackknife. So the 78 pattern is a little bigger than the 15 pattern, which is one of Great Eastern Cutlery's, probably their most well-known pattern. It's a little bigger than that one. I think that this is about 3 3/4 inches long, whereas the 15 pattern is 3.5 inches long. And for me, it makes for a nice size knife. Definitely not too big to carry, really not close to too big to carry, but I can get a really full 4-finger grip on the handle without having to, squeeze my fingers together or have one going off of the edge. So I really like the size of this knife. I think that this is a really nice closed length at around 3 3/4 inches. And the shape of this knife, with it being a not quite a teardrop for sleeve board. This is a sleeve board style jack. So that means that one of the ends, both ends are rounded, but one end is a little more rounded and it is thinner, and then the other end is a little less rounded and a little wider. And I actually didn't know why it was called a sleeve board until recently, when I was watching again, I hope I'm pronouncing this name right, but a Stephen Schmalhaus review. He has great reviews on Great Eastern Cutlery knives and some case knives, and often ties it back to the history of the knife pattern, which I really enjoy, being interested in history myself, as well as some literary ties. So if you're interested in these Great Eastern Cutlery knives, I would definitely suggest checking out Stephen Schmalhaus's YouTube channel. And again, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. If not, sorry. But great videos there, and he kind of talked about the history of these sleeve board patterns, and apparently there is a kind of side part or an auxiliary part of ironing boards that is shaped like this, with a wider end, on one end that's a little less rounded, and then a thinner end on the other end that was for ironing sleeves, the sleeves of shirts. So hence the sleeve board. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Now that I know that thing exists, that ironing board auxiliary piece exists, it's a very fitting name because of the shape of the knife. But that shape, that frame shape, a sleeve board, is a very classic shape for a jack knife like this. And then also this spear point blade is a very classic blade shape for a knife, a jackknife. I think that this is one of Great Eastern Cutlery's better looking spear points. It's not too wide, it's not too abrupt with the drop here. Some of their spear points, like on the 25 jack or Little Barlow, kind of has almost like a clip look to it, because it kind of is an abrupt turn down there. But this one, not so much. It's nice and sloped, not too wide, definitely not too thin. It's not a Zulu spear like some of the more modern spear blade shape designs and stuff, or the ones you're seeing more so on custom knives and things like that. But definitely a nice blade shape, and in my month of carrying and using this knife, I found that it was really useful. You know, I used it a lot for food prep, cutting up peppers, you know, potatoes, onions, tomatoes, things like that. I used it a lot for breaking down boxes. Definitely worked well for that. It's ground pretty thin, so it does slice well. And just general use also, I think a spear point blade like this is a really nice, very broad use blade shape. You get some tip, not as much as on a clip point. You get some belly, not as much as on a Skinner blade shape or a drop point blade shape. And you get a nice amount of straight edge, not quite as much as on a Wharncliffe or a Sheepfoot, but you know, kind of brings everything together for a very good utility blade shape. And kind of talking about that, I think that this is a very, actually let me move on to the handle first. So the handle on this is smooth white bone, and the first Great Eastern Cutlery knife that I got, the first knife that really made me interested in their knives, was a smooth ivory bone Sheepfoot number 15 TC Barlow. And this bone is pretty much the same. I think that there's some slight differences, but the smooth white bone and the smooth ivory bone, at least the smooth white bone on this knife, is pretty much the same as the smooth ivory bone. So I'm happy with how it looks, but you know, it's definitely nice looking and everything, but it doesn't stand out. And kind of going back to what I was gonna say about this knife in general is that it doesn't really, I guess, stand out as different. You know, it's got a pretty classic spear point blade shape that's, you know, useful, works really well, looks relatively good, but it doesn't look different than other knives. The handle, again, sleeve board, you know, pretty, looks like a lot of other knives. The hot dog shield, which I don't dislike as much as some people do, but nothing special. And then the smooth white bone handles, very good looking, I think kind of classy looking, and very classic looking, but not different, right? Not stand out. So I actually think, and the reason why I did this video pretty quickly after it was requested, is that I actually think I might be letting go of this knife. And part of the reason for that is because I sometimes get, you know, like, I guess an itchy feeling if I have too many knives. It seems silly to have so many if I'm not carrying and using them. And I have probably only carried or used this knife less than 5 times since January, when I carried it every day. Now, I don't know if that's because I got tired of carrying it because I carried it every day. It could be partly that. But it could also be that it just doesn't stand out that much. You know, I have some really different knives, and this is a very good knife, but it's not a very, you know, unique or standout knife. So I do think that I'm going to put this up for sale. If it doesn't sell for the price that I'd like to get for it, then I'll keep it for sure. But I do have a custom knife on order that I'd like to kind of get some funds from some knives that I'm going to sell to help fund that. But kind of, again, moving back to the good things about this knife is one of the best made Great Eastern Cutlery knives I have. So to start out with a small thing here, perfectly centered. Really couldn't ask for better centering. Sorry, it's moving, the camera's moving a little bit here. I'm not set up how I normally am for videos, but perfect centering, couldn't ask for any better centering. Absolutely no gaps. No gaps on the back spring, no gaps between the covers and the bolsters. It's actually the best of that, I think, that I've seen on any Great Eastern Cutlery knife. It just very smoothly transitions between the two. The pins, very well, you know, sanded, rounded in. They're not too recessed, you know, there's not too deep, you know, holes for the pins there. The shield is set in really well. I don't know how well you can see that, but there's really no extra space there, which because GEC shields are pinned, sometimes there is a little bit extra, very little, but a little bit extra space. There's not really any with this knife. This knife came with a great action, and it stayed, and I think even gotten a little bit better. It has probably the smoothest pull of any Great Eastern Cutlery knife I have, and any traditional knife. So there's no resistance. I mean, obviously there's spring resistance, but the spring is right around a 5.5, maybe 6, but I'd say probably closer to a 5.5. And just, hits to the half stop perfectly, and then again, no resistance to the full open. And when I say resistance, of course, I don't mean the spring. It has a 5.5-ish spring tension. I mean roughness inside the handle, anything catching, which does happen sometimes. I actually have a knife at GEC right now, my 45 Lumberjack, because it was catching inside the handle and making it difficult to open. But none of that on this knife. It's just as smooth as I think can be, or can be expected from a knife like this. That's a production knife. Some custom knives, like the one I have on order, they recess the liners so that it doesn't even touch. But from a production knife, I don't think that it can get any smoother than this. Again, something I don't care too much about, but the back spring is perfectly, in line with the handles there, and really fits really well. Great fit and finish. Also perfectly level when open. It does stick up a little bit when it's at the half stop, but again, not something that I consider a fit or finish issue. And then the blade didn't come with any scratches. I mean, it does have some now because I've used it a lot and everything, but it great finish on the blade and everything. So while like I say, this knife doesn't stand out in what it is, like the frame or the handles or covers or even the blade shape, it does stand out somewhat to me by how well made it is. I think that this is really the smoothest and one of the nicest made Great Eastern Cutlery knives I have. So that's why, like I say, I do plan to put it up for sale, but I am going to put it at, I guess not a high price, but I think that it's such a well-made knife that I'm not going to sell it for super cheap. I'm not going to sell it for $50. Because I think that it's such a well-made knife that, it's something that I'm happy to keep. It's just not something that I think is a must-have for my collection or a must-have for my carry rotation. So if you're looking for one of these, watch out. I'll probably be selling it on Blade Forums. I'll maybe put it up on Instagram also. But otherwise, like I say, even though, again, I guess what I'm saying is that it doesn't stand out as what it is, but it does stand out to me in how well it's made. So it's not something that I feel like I have to keep in my collection or in my carry rotation because it's something that I don't have in any other knife. But at the same time, it's something that I do enjoy carrying and using. So thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to like it, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them. I'm happy to answer those. And if you'd like to get notifications for any other videos, don't forget to subscribe. That way you get notifications when I post more videos, and I do have more videos coming up. So thanks for watching, and don't forget to go out and do good.